remember the day when I first got my Nintendo Wii. I remember the excitement I felt as I took it from its box, playing Wii Sports for the very first time, and most of all, I remember the Mii channel. Yes, the Mii channel was how I spent a lot of my time with the Wii, making Miis of all my favorite characters, as well as some of my own, and putting them into the various games I own that supported them. Simply put, I absolutely adore Miis. Fast forward a few years, to the release of the 3DS. I got one for myself, and I was even more excited when I found out, yes, the Miis were back! Sure enough, I spent much of my time making Miis and playing with them in Tomodachi life. Fast forward a few more years, to the release of what would soon become one of my favorite games of all time, Miitopia. As soon as I heard there was an RPG that lets you pick all your favorite Miis as the cast, I just had to get it. Of course, I chose to make the protagonist be my own Mii, Susumu. I started out by making her a mage, but over the course of the game, I was sadly forced to change her class twice, so I made her a scientist, and finally, a pop star. My party members were all unique as well. Prif the laid-back imp, Yardi the stubborn thief, Konade the kind flower, and so on. Aside from my own Mii, however, one of my favorites was a cautious cleric named Samuel. He was cute, with his sparkling eyes, white hair, and always smiling mouth. Not to mention, he was incredibly helpful in battle as well, from his ability to heal the entire party to the ability to insta-kill enemies. Whenever Samuel was with me, I felt safer even in tougher areas, and thought nothing could go wrong. That is, until one day, when I was traveling through the 2nd District in New Lumos. It was me, Yardi, Samuel, and my team's vampire Toshiro, and we were up against an angry queen. We managed to get its health down to about half, until it decided to attack the entire party. After taking a ton of damage each, I thought we were done for, until Toshiro tried something that is. Toshiro ended up using his enthrall skill on Samuel. I knew it was something beneficial, but the skill also turned the affected Mii's eyes red. Normally this didn't bother me, but on Samuel, something about it just seemed creepy to me. What was more, he seemed to be staring directly into the camera as this happened, almost as if he was actually looking at me. Fortunately, however, the battle continued as usual. Samuel managed to heal the party before we went down, and we finished the angry queen with no problem. Something still wasn't right, however. Even after the battle, Samuel's eyes were still red. What? Even if he never had to auto-revive, his eyes should have turned back to their usual color. Not only that, but even now he still seemed to be staring right at me. I thought that maybe I had gotten some kind of rare error. Maybe it would be back to normal once we got into the inn. If only that had been the case. Once we got back to the inn, the rest of the game seemed to be functioning as normal, aside from Samuel's red eyes. Once the Miis woke up, a cutscene began. Samuel was sitting in his room with Raya, until he said, "I want to go to Toshiro's room." Okay, maybe he wanted to talk to Toshiro. I moved Samuel and Toshiro into a room together, and clicked the speech bubble to watch the scene play out. Samuel was giving a present to Toshiro, much to my surprise. Toshiro opened the present, and it turned out to be a painting of Samuel. Something was different, however. Normally on these painting gifts, the Mii's face on the painting was completely obscured. This one, however, looked exactly like Samuel, complete with red eyes and his usual smile. Now just looking creepy rather than cute. "Toshiro is sort of happy," the screen said, and then the cutscene ended. When I was back in the inn, however, Toshiro was gone. He was just no longer in the room with Samuel. Wait, what? How could he just be gone? I went into the set out menu, and Toshiro wasn't there either. He wasn't on the eat menu or the party screen. He hadn't even been moved to the villa somehow. Of course, my first instinct was to add him back into the game. He was still in my Mii Maker, but as I went to add him, an error message appeared on the screen. "This Mii is already in use." At this point, I was just confused by this. Toshiro wasn't in my game, but it was saying he was? What was going on here? My next thought was to reset the game. Everything else seemed normal as I started up, but once I got into the inn, Toshiro was still not there. I went to add him back again, but that same message appeared. This meat is already in use. I shrugged it off. I had plenty of other Miis in the villa, and the rest of the game seemed just fine. So I continued playing the game as usual, and everything else worked as it should. When I finished the next stage and returned to the inn, however, Samuel spoke up once more. I want to go to Prif's room. I moved Samuel and Prif together, thinking that same thing from before was just a one-time glitch. It wouldn't happen again, right? Except it did. Samuel ended up giving Prif another one of his creepy self-portraits. Prif, as sort of happy, appeared as usual, and once the cutscene ended, she was gone. Just like Toshiro, Prif had been erased. And when I tried to add her back, just like before, this Mii is already in use. I was starting to get a bit worried for my game. What was going on with Samuel? Why was he just erasing everyone like that? I decided to add 2 more Miis from my villa, Sashio and Junpei, to make up for the 2 I had lost, and continued on to the next stage. Once I returned, however, Samuel continued on. I want to go to Konade's room. Oh no, not this time, I said to myself, opting to set out once more rather than letting Samuel delete yet another of his friends. When I clicked the set out button, however, the present cutscene played anyway? Okay, this just kept getting weirder and weirder. After the cutscene, Konade was erased, just like Toshiro and Prif had been. The game had continued on like this for quite some time. I would finish a stage, and Samuel would want to visit someone's room to give them one of his frightening gifts. Even if I refused, even if I added new Miis from my villa or from the Mii Maker, Samuel would just erase them like everyone else. Eventually, it got down to the very last Mii, Susumu. As Susumu and Samuel made their way down the streets of New Lumos, I was terrified to see what would happen to poor Susumu. Would she be deleted like the rest? Or would something more horrible happen to her? Once we got to the inn, the inevitable message appeared. I want to go to Susumu's room. Except this time, Samuel went into her room without any input from me at all. As usual, he gave her one of his red-eyed paintings. Susumu is sort of happy appeared, and after the cutscene, she was completely erased. After this happened, however, a new cutscene began to play. Samuel was standing in the middle of the inn, still staring right at the camera, and still with his red eyes. He stared at me for a few seconds, until something happened. His facial features suddenly began to change. His eyes and mouth began rapidly flickering through different appearances, and from the look on his face, it seemed to be incredibly painful for him. Strange red pixels started to spill from where his neck would be, staining his white robe and the floor. I couldn't stand to see him like this. One of my favorite Mii is now dying so horribly. Fortunately, I didn't have to for much longer. His body began to fade slowly, one line of pixels at a time, until he eventually vanished completely. The inn was now completely empty, save for the pixelated blood Samuel had left behind. The screen faded to black, and the game closed itself. I restarted my 3DS, and everything seemed fine, except for one thing. There was a new badge on my home menu. Miitopia badge, it said, and it depicted Samuel with his creepy red-eyed appearance. I went to the badge edit screen to remove it, or at least move it out of sight, but there were no options to remove or even reposition the badge. And what about my Miitopia game then? I reloaded the game and everything looked okay, except for one thing. My save file had been deleted. I sighed in frustration, but if everything was okay from here on out, starting over would be worth it. I just had to be more careful with vampires, I guess.